And this is Class 8 in our Duality Reality course. And boy, we've come a long way looking at these. It's going over the notes last evening and just kind of looking at the subjects that we've covered in the different classes. In last week's class was moving into the idea of making friends with the shadow. So we've gone through the idea of really realizing, I love this, really realizing that duality, reality is a very important basis for the foundation of your spiritual practice, for the foundation of understanding this world that we live in and some of the things that people do at times. Duality, reality is very important for making sense of the whole experience that we experience here on the Mother Earth. So as you are breathing this morning in and out, remembering choices and options and making a choice right now, right here, to have a reality, to pick a reality, to this day's reality, to be one of balance, of peace, and of calm. And as we move into that awareness that we have a choice somehow of how we will behave, of how we will respond, of how we will react, we have that choice. We don't have the power to control what other people do, but we do have the power to manage what we do. We do have the choice. So drawing your breath in deeply, deeply, we'll begin with the invocation for 2018, fear not. I face fear with the truth in my heart that love is the way. I am love. I face fear with the truth in my heart that love is the way. I am love. I face fear with the truth in my heart that love is the way. I am love. Drawing the breath in. I shine the light of my divine nature onto the shadows, onto the shadow self. I shine the light of my divine nature onto the shadows, illuminating my fears. I am divine love. I shine the light of my divine nature onto the shadows, illuminating my fears. I am divine love. I shine the light of my divine nature onto the shadow self, illuminating my fears. I am divine love. This is a challenging one. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. In my heart, I know that fear cannot survive in the light of divine love. I am divine love. In my heart, I know that fear cannot survive in the light of divine love. I am divine love. In my heart, I know that fear cannot survive in the light of divine love. I am divine love. I face each day with love and gratitude, knowing that love is the most powerful force in the universe. I am love. I face each day with love and gratitude, knowing that love is the most powerful force in the universe. I am love. I face each day with love and gratitude, knowing that love is the most powerful force in the universe. I am love. Breathing in, breathing out. Letting that invocation settle in your mind, in your heart, in your body. And as it settles, letting that invocation settle in your mind, in your heart, in your body. And as it settles, feel yourself looking over your choices, looking over where you are, looking over the parts that might remain in fear and shadow. In duality reality, we look at the dual nature of life, the dual nature of the earth plane, the night, the day. It's slowly becoming lighter here in California. Let me move my curtain and peek out the window. Slowly becoming lighter. It was pitch black when I woke up before. And so watching the light creep slowly but surely into the atmosphere and change into the duality of daytime from the duality of nighttime. Duality reality. The wholeness is understanding it as a cycle. So in the duality reality and in the acceptance of the dual nature of myself, of other beings in the world, of the shadow, accepting the shadow as well as the persona. Carl Jung was the one that sort of gave us this idea, well, at least he's the one that's noted for it, gave us the idea of calling the shadow self, and the persona, the one that we reflect out into the world. And we spoke in our class 4 about the persona and the shadow, about the self that society tells us is acceptable, about the self that society tells us is acceptable, about the self that society tells us is acceptable, about the self that we notice. So as children, we begin to notice there are behaviors that happen, that our emotional self expresses, that other kid takes away our toy and we clock him over the head with the sand pail, that, we take away somebody else's toy, and we begin to be trained by our parents, by society, by school. No, honey, that's not good behavior. And sometimes we hear, that's bad, you're bad. And so the energy or the feeling that arose that wanted that pretty red fire truck or that little doll that somebody had or whatever it was and grabbed at it, maybe even in the moment just saw it and grabbed at it out of joy, just got slapped down and told it that it was, terrible, bad, greedy, jealous, whatever. And so it's not a feeling all of a sudden to be not loved by your caretaker or the person that's important to you. And to children, the parents, the adults around them are important to them, no matter how flawed those adults might be. So to little children, that's who they know as the power in their world, the caretaker, the adult around them. And sometimes, if you look over the world and think of children being born every day, you can realize that some children might be born to a very balanced family, and other children might be born in a very scary reality, and other children might be born to people who have fallen to a negative side, just as children could be born to someone who's extremely connected to the idea of being positive all the time. And so what we're basically saying is that the adults around them might very well be imbalanced. And so we strive for balance. We strive for that middle way. We strive for the dot on that horizontal line. We strive to be that dot in the middle of the horizontal line. And then we take our camera of our mind's eye, or as you're visualizing your white screen, and you fiddle with the camera and so that that dot moves straight back. It stays in the middle, but it moves off the line. It moves way back so that it can observe the line and it can observe the dot self. So you kind of turn into two dots then. That starts to move to the right or to the left. And you can start to understand why you move to the right or the left. Now this is key. When we graduated to class number 7 and we talked about the idea of befriending the shadow self, of not keeping it locked down under the manhole, that someday if you lock it deep down in the dark sewer it's going to explode, or not being pushed it off to the side, or not tying it up in a tidy little bag that started in childhood when you were told you were greedy, jealous, a little catty, whatever. And sometimes it's even amusing. Sometimes we like to look at our kids doing naughty things and we kind of laugh about them. Even though we're telling them we're naughty, we also laugh. Oh, isn't that cute? Oh, you're not supposed to do that, Charlie, da-da-da-da-da, whatever. And, guess what happens there? The mixed message. It's okay sometimes. So the mind, the crafty little mind that's developing gets the idea that, oh, I got attention from doing that bad thing. And especially in this world where we have such an ability to gain an audience. as human beings. We've always had the ability to gain an audience, but social media and media and Instagram and Facebook and blah, 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 allows us to gain an audience very easily. So we can go out there in the world and we can gain an audience of, from our negative antics. Think about it a moment. How many times have you been on Facebook scrolling down and you saw something negative and you were like, that's terrible. You're just, and so then you started watching and the next thing you knew, you followed the next negative to the next negative to the next negative. And so on a level, even though you were very clearly leaning to a specific side and saying that's wrong, you were still attracted to it. Opposites attract. Opposites attract. Therefore, negatives will attract positives, and positives will attract negatives to a certain degree. Again, over and over in this class, we've used the example of the rubberneckers on the highway. They look at the car accident. The traffic slows down because people are drawn to it, whether it's out of horror or it's out of fright or it's out of, just some aspect. There's a number of things evolved in the response, because guess what? We aren't black and white. We aren't night and day. We aren't simply one way or another. We're a giant stew of a whole bunch of realities, of a whole bunch of choices and options, of a whole bunch of genetic proclivities, of a whole bunch of influences from a million outside sources. And right now, we have millions of influences to catch our mind in a moment. That's not a bad thing. It can make you very well-rounded. If you take those millions of influences and you don't dive deeply into any of the aspects, then you're going to have the option and opportunity of being scattered. So you might ask me, well, damn, how the heck do I handle this world of all this stuff? Because I do know, you know what? I do know, Melissa, that I get influenced, and I, Melissa, know that I get influenced by a lot of the different realities that are flashing at me constantly in the outer world. Never mind in the dream time or the peripheral world, stuff that's flashing inside myself. I have to go inward. Last week, full moon. There's an influence. There is a geological, an influence. There's a vibrational influence of the waxing and the waning of the moon. We kind of know that. We kind of know that it's powerful. You guys know that more than everyone else. I know, for example, Cherry on the phone often does the new moon, the full moon. She watches the energy of the moon. She does a ritual on the new moon, remembering that, hey, this is the time to plant seeds because that full moon's going to come and there's going to be a harvest. That happens every 28, 30 days. In the bigger picture, year to year, we got the cycles going on. In the bigger picture, we got the cycles of winter, spring, summer, and fall. All you got to do is call. No, in the other cycle, we've got the cycles that show us that you actually can't plant seeds that are, you can't harvest seeds in the winter. There's a cycle. So nature has tried to show us that I'm whole. Yes, it's a dual world, the earth, and duality is a reality. But I'm whole because I follow the cycles. I respect the times. I stay centered and I plan ahead. So the natural world has a plan. We come in and we mess the plan up because we decide we want that red truck or that pretty doll that so-and-so has, and we get off course. We get distracted, attracted, repelled, but still attracted sometimes. Look, I think it's really important to keep going back to the fact that a foundation for a spiritual practice, a foundation for a practice of being a better human being, if you don't like the word spiritual, a foundation for a practice of being balanced and having a balanced life has to accept the duality reality and has to have some kind of practice that helps you stay in the middle way. We even talked about there's a whole, in Mahayana Buddhism, there's a whole, I don't know what you want to call it, there's a whole, it's called the middle way, they call it the middle way. There's a whole ideal or idea of being in the middle and understanding this duality reality. So when you look back through, if you go over these classes, and we send them to you in recording, so I recommend that you do, if you go through these every once in a while and you redo them or you pick out one to re-listen to, it takes you back to the realization of, oh, let me take a look again. Let me step back. Have I gotten out of balance? Has my dot moved over to the right or to the left? Where's the dot gone? Where am I? So all you're doing there is saying, yeah, I am spirit and form. I'm not the salt in the stew. I'm not the pepper in the stew. I'm not the, olive in the stew. I'm not the, meat in the stew. I'm spirit. The stew is something I have. The feelings are something I have. The thoughts are something I have. The body is something I have. I'm something else. When we remember that, we have the ability to look at all the parts and see if they're functioning cohesively. Am I getting enough sleep? Am I eating right? Am I balancing out my inward time? The bear taught us last week when there was a full moon pulling on us, the bear taught us to go inward. The energy of the week, go inward. The energy of the week was go inward. The owl said, look in the dark, see the shadows, see in the dark, find the balance. This week, we shifted and we got the butterfly, which is transformation, transforming something, and the bear shifted to the position of support. Go inward. How do I support my transformation? I go inward. So this brings us back to this week, in the duality reality, understanding our shadow natures, because we've been examining them, so you're getting to understanding them. But now, how to support delving into the shadows. Let's go back to the dot on our screen, the dot that's in the middle of our line. So we actually haven't visualized a dot yet on the screen. We've simply talked about being the observer in the middle. But now I want you to go back to your little visualization chapter in your brain, in your head, in your reality. And I want you to see that blank movie screen. You're in the theater, you're relaxed, you're looking at the screen, and all of a sudden that horizontal line appears. And I want you to just put a dot there. Might be easy to just put a dot, or you might want to put a symbol of a stick figure, or whatever your symbol is. Stick it in the middle. Drawing the breath in and releasing the breath. Going back to our breath class, doing the Samavritti, which is equalized breathing, breathing in and breathing out, breathing in and breathing out, equalized breathing, Samavritti. There you are, breathing in and breathing out. And now let the dot step all the way back into the chair where you are. You're the dot. You're in the middle. Your line is balanced. You've decided to accept that there is duality reality, that you have a dual nature, that the world has a dual nature. You've decided to accept that. You've accepted it. You've turned around and looked into the shadows. And maybe you haven't liked what you've unpacked. Maybe you've seen something that's a little frightening. So the dream body, or the dreamer, the dream aspect that you have, and I'm talking about the one where you actually fall asleep and your body goes into 6 hours, 8 hours, 3 hours, whatever it goes into, needs to go into a longer period to really get into those deep dreams. And sometimes you have dreams. I was in Utah, and I was in a hotel room staying with a friend, and I had mixed dreams. She appeared in my dreams sometimes. Other things appeared in my dreams. I was at a convention. There was a lot of people, so lots of things appeared in my dreams. And I've been playing with the symbols from the dreams, some of the pictures. So sometimes during a dream, a vivid dream, there's a fantastic flow of insight. Sometimes the shadow tendencies pour forth. A lot of people tell me that they have sometimes violent dreams or fearful dreams, or someone's chasing them, or something's going on in the dream time, and we'll come and we'll unpack the dream together. We'll look at it. We'll look at components. We'll break it down. So a lot of times what happens is the shadow tendencies will show up in the dream times. If you haven't been examining them in the non-dream time, if you haven't been saying, I'm going to go in and look at my own shadows, they will emerge a lot of times in the dream times. And if you pay attention to them, you can begin to understand, as you understand these parts of yourself, that in the dream time, fears or unhelpful thought patterns or stifled emotions can appear. And so the stifled emotion or the unthoughtful pattern or the emotion might appear in the dream as a boogeyman, someone that's chasing you, an adversarial dream. It might appear in that way. So think about that. And so a lot, by studying dream work, a lot can, be resolved, can be revealed, at least. Not resolution is going to have to be another choice, but it can be revealed, and your ability to look at it from that reveal can really bring a lot of clarity to you. So the dark side. Remember Luke Skywalker and, Yoda saying, you have to go through this being seduced by the dark side, and is the seduction going to take place? Is he going to fall into it or wallow into it? The dark side, does it scare you? The dark side, does it entice you? Do you know what it is? The dark side is the shadow, or the term given to it was by the psychologist Carl Jung, which we've talked about, and he described it as the denied or repressed aspect of the self. The denied or repressed aspect of the self. And, as children and adolescents, we're a little bit more powerful when we move out of that tower. Well, I won't say we're a little bit more powerful, because I've seen toddlers, hold a room of adults in thrall as they act out and behave, and I watch sometimes you can watch the moment where the toddler gets, I have an audience. If I do this, the audience approves. If I do that, I get a laugh. If I do this, you see how the brain works? See how we started to learn? Then we become adolescents, and come on, duality, reality. Your body is all of a sudden being charged with hormones. Hormones are shooting into your bloodstream, and you're acting in ways that you didn't act before. You're feeling things that you didn't feel before, and they're strong and powerful urges. So that's when we begin to hide away parts of ourselves. And sometimes we're being told that the aspects are bad or unacceptable or wrong. Instead of just examining the aspect and understanding it, there's a pat answer, that's a bad thing, that's a good thing. And so then we stuff them around, and we have the secret little fanny pack, or the secret little stuff bag, or the secret little under the, down in the sewer part. And, but you can't get rid of it. It gets carried around with you. You can stuff it. You can hide it. You can paste, makeup over it, whatever it looks like. You can paste a persona over it, and a lot of people won't see it. And sometimes you can get so good at your persona that you don't see it. So you're carrying this bag along, and you're never consciously looking at it. You guys are consciously looking at it. You're opening up. You're going down that path. You're going into the void. Whether you look at it or not, and I want you to think of this, it's there, and the hidden aspects still shape your lives. So we, who have worked together for many years, a lot of us on here, have talked about manifestation sometime, And when we want to manifest, say, abundance or a life partner or a new job or whatever, and we put out affirmations and we focus on it and we put work and time into it, we get really freaking confused why we don't get it. Oh, Melissa, I did all the affirmations, Oh, whoever you're talking to about trying to turn something around in your life. Oh, to the psychologist. I did everything that you suggested. Oh, to the priest or to the rabbi or to, the teacher. I did all the stuff and I still didn't get what I want. Doesn't work. Remember the stew again? Let's go back to the stew. So we are made up of trillions of parts just in this organic computer, that's what I call it, that we are. And it has a nervous system, it has an endocrine system, it has, lungs, liver, spleen, pancreas, these are major organs, heart, then gallbladder, then stomach. So it's got all these major kidneys. I left out the kidneys, the imperial kidneys. So we have all these major parts in the body. Do you even know what they do in your body? Some of them are filters that filter out garbage. But if a lot of garbage gets thrown into the body, the filters are going to get clogged, right? When you vacuum all the time, you have to take the filters out and change them. When you are using a water purifier, you got to take the filters out and change them. When you have an air conditioning system, you got to change the filters. And a lot of times when you take a filter out, it's dirty. It's really dirty because it's been filtering out something. When you snap a filter off the end of a cigarette, it's full of tar and nicotine. It's dirty. Okay. Think about this. I had a dream the other night, and I was walking. It was just, a series of dreams. A part of dream, many flashes by. But there was one part in the dream when I was walking along barefoot and, down by the beach or whatever on one of those beachy roads, and the tar spots got on my foot. Those of you who are down by the beach and you're walking down to the beach, and the blacktop sometimes gets hot and sizzly, and you get those little tar spots, sticky spots on your foot, and you got to go scrub it off. So I thought about it. In the foundation, I have some tarry spots that I need to pay attention to. That's what my dream is taking me to, and I'm going to keep delving through that and looking at it and seeing what in my foundation still needs changing. All right, simple dream that I just gave you, simple part of it. It was a big, multifaceted, epic dream with lots of flashes of different things going on. But that was the part that, that was the part that was for me, and I needed to pay attention to, and I still need to pay attention to. So you learn how to look at this stuff. You learn how to look at the shadow. That's what you're doing. That's what I'm doing. We're taking time to look at the shadow. Last week we talked about befriending it. However, we have to be strong enough to look at the shadow. I'm going to move out into the world. In the last few days, some shadow realities have emerged and expressed themselves, not in the dream time, but in the physical world, in actions. Remember that stew again? There are many parts, just like there are many parts of the body. And if we isolate the part and just focus on one part, we don't get holistic healing. We have to focus on all the systems. I'm working with an acupuncturist right now on some of my physical issues, and my kidneys are run down, but I can't take the kidney medicine yet because my liver is a little bit clogged, and the kidney medicine is rich. It's there to re-support the kidneys and give me back energy. So I have to look at the whole system. If I just went right to the kidneys, started supporting, I might overactivate my liver because I haven't changed the filter in it lately. Same thing if you look at your car. If you fix one thing, you don't fix the other, then it's going to break down still again because the other needs cleaning up. So going back to breathing in the moment, finding your dot with all these things swirling around, and recognizing that the hidden stuff is going to come out at some point in an explosive way if we don't pay attention to it. And there is a lot to see in this world that is not palatable, that is going on. Yesterday there was a shooting in a synagogue. Lots of things coming up. Terrible. We say, oh God, it's terrible. And it is terrible. And I want to know how we got there. I want to know how I don't want to just say this shooter is a disgusting, mucky version of my inner shadow that's wrong and that I pushed away. I want to be able to look at it and say, how did they get there? What part did I play in them getting there? What part did I play in society holding on to a certain reality? What part did I play in the whole mess that's out in the world right now? And to do that, I have to go back, look at my dot, look at my shifting self, the sides that are, hidden in the dark that pull me, just as the sides that are in the light that pull me. So there are all these stories, if you look at all these stories of people who go through suffering their internal demons and come out on the bright side, like St. Francis of Assisi. I mean, he's got tons of writings of the pulls of, the world and the things that pulled him into his shadow self. He struggled to find that peace, Buddha struggled to understand duality, sat under that tree for, months, starving himself after he'd been the rich king in the palace, trying to figure it out. And what he finally figured out was the middle way. Come to the middle way. I can't go to extreme on one way or the other. I'm not going to live a balanced life. So, after we've befriended the shadow, that means we're willing to turn around and take a look at this thing and try to find a way to love it. That means I have to look at the things in the world that have attracted me that are icky, just like the things in the world that have attracted me are positive. And we've talked about mirroring, realizing that if we look at something that really draws us when these sudden feelings come up of guilt, of shame, of embarrassment, even of anger, when we've fumed about something we've seen or we've fumed about somebody's words to us or actions, those are strong energies that can set a red flag off in my head that says, hey, go back to that empty theater, pull up the screen again. And sometimes when I'm full of thoughts and feelings and issues and pulls, it's hard for me to go back to the empty theater. Breathe in, breathe out, and breathe in and breathe out, and call up the blank screen and find the dot. And when I've been in that agitated moment, the dot might be going crazy all over that line, might be out of control. And I breathe in, I breathe out, and I try to slow it down, and I try to look clearly, and I look through the urges and the surges going on in my body. And I recognize these things in the outer world, or these things that a specific person does, or a person that I find it hard to look at. Come on, I find it hard to, let's go back to Charles Manson, to try to understand Charles Manson and look at him, to try to understand that guy that kidnapped a 14-year-old girl with his wife and, raped her and tortured her every day, to try to understand this guy that sent bombs out to all these particular people just recently, or to try to understand this guy that just shot up a synagogue, or to try to understand that 67-year-old man that came out and said, 60 years ago I saw a rape and I didn't say anything about it. And I think there's a perfect example. Here's someone that's stepping forth and saying, I've had this shadow stuck in my background for 60 years. I'm coming forth now because on the news I saw that woman testify that this guy that's up for candidacy for judge said that she was molested by him and a group of boys. And this guy's experience 60 years ago was very similar. He said he was in, I think, Philadelphia, somewhere in Pennsylvania. He was at a party. There was more boys than girls, a bunch of giggling adolescents. Remember, this adolescent might be someone who's had a lot of shadows stuffed in his pocket already from toddlerhood, from childhood, from the world, from, who knows, his church, his synagogue, his temple, who knows. And he's at this party, and one of the guys, and there's a couple of girls there, and everyone's drinking, and so inhibitions when we get drunk, out of control, sometimes the shadows start to surface, and somebody pokes him in the shoulder and says, hey, come outside. And he goes outside. He's 17. He's a teenager. He goes outside, and they run around to the basement window, and there's a big jock, a leader of the boys, and, the football hero, whatever, and he's like, thumbs up, and he's got a drunk girl there. And he basically starts molesting the girl. But on the way to molesting it, the guy describes what he saw. They start to unbutton her clothes or pull down her pants. And one thing he says, he's never seen a naked girl before. He's 17 years old. This is not an excuse. This is an unpacking. This is my little caveat right now. So the one part that I don't see going on in this experience that he's unpacking is the elephant in the room, which maybe does, as they get further into it, come to the surface more. I don't know. Now let's go to his reason for unpacking it. Guilt, shame, that was triggered by something he saw in the world. His own guilt, his own shame, his own disappointment with himself for not doing something, his own issues rose to the surface. And when they rose to the surface, he decided to expose himself and say these things. And one of the things he said is that I decided to do this because until men recognize how they behave or talk about it or stand up for women, until men stand up for women, and still different races stand up for each other, and still different genders stand up for each other when they see something that is not balanced, until they do that, it's not going to change. That's what he said. That's powerful. Think about that. Until I face the fact that there's some spots in my foundation, some tar on my feet still, I'm not going to change into what I want to change into. I'm not going to transform. Honey, I have to look at the tar spots on my feet. You have to look at the spots in your shadows. This guy had to look at his shadows to be able to get up and say that. Now, reading that was not easy for me. Just reading his exposure of his 17-year-old self looking in the window. And one of the things I realized, again, it wasn't stated in the statement, is that at 17, he does make the thing. He'd never seen a naked woman. Remember that body and those hormones that I talked about, those pulls? He was probably titillated. Why do you think people go and pay money to go to these horror movies? There's something that titillates them when they see, attracts them. We're attracted to the opposite of what we are. And at some base, even that guy that sent the pipe bombs and that guy that did that terrible thing and shot those people in the synagogue, or this 17-year-old that shut up for 60 years after he saw a rape, and you can just fill in the blanks and go on and on with lists of things that you know, and lists of things that you probably wish you had done that you didn't do out of fear or out of shame or out of hiding in the shadow, some part of yourself you didn't want people to see. It's not a bad thing. It's the fact that we have shadow natures. It's the fact that if we don't pay attention to them, they can shape us and control us. Maybe that guy hid lots of other things for himself in all those years that he hid things, and so therefore that flavor was always in his stew. So if I made a stew and it's perfectly delicious, but there's one tiny taste that's, it's in the background. What was that herb I put in here that I would change in the recipe next time? So sometimes a tiny little thing can affect the tiny little thing does affect the whole stew. It does. You know that. I know that. Back to this guy. So again, it was hard to read about what he did. It was a wonderful thing that he came out and exposed himself, but reading through his exposure of his story and those kids brought me back to times when I did something sneaky that I don't want you all to know about, and eventually that I don't want me to know about, or that there's something sneaky in your life, or something that maybe is not sneaky, but you're stuck in the shadows because you're embarrassed about it, or you're ashamed of it. And so what do? What is your subconscious do? What does that part that's shaping you do? It creates someone in the outer world to point a finger at you at some point, or to resist you, or to find something, to judge you. Wow, what a complex thing this whole thing is. Going back to the shadow. So back to that dot on the line that you've added to your visualization, that dot of you in the middle, and your ability to remember to go back and breathe in and breathe out, and take some quiet time with Bear, and look at your horizontal line. Again, is the dot going crazy? Is it simply moved one way to the right or one way to the left? Can you bring it back to center and take a look? So everything plays into this. Physiology, physicality, mind, thoughts, emotions, feelings. All of this plays into the reality of what moves forth, what we create, what we manifest every freaking day. All of this moves forth. All of it's in the mix. The only way I cannot let one part of the mix take precedent is by having a strong foundation in spirit, in center, in a practice that helps me have a strong foundation. Each and every one of you on this phone that has been practicing looking into your shadow and the stuff that comes up for you has a strong heart. You can't look at the freaking shadow without scaring yourself. You can't look at it without being tintillated sometimes. I think that's why we have a huge industry. What was that movie, 50 Shades of Shadows of Grey, or whatever the heck it was? I didn't bother to see that movie. I'm not going to. But I know thousands of people did, and I'm sure it had scenes or posing of masochism, different stuff like that. Just going to the edge, just titillating that shadow inside of people, and people coming out and repressing it. Did you ever find, I remember as a kid, my brother finding a Playboy magazine hidden in the house, and then we would get together at some point. He found it under the bed, between the mattress of one of my parents' rooms, and I don't want to say why it was there or what that person was doing with it. I have no idea, Or maybe I have some ideas, but I don't really know in reality. But I remember sneaking off with him and looking through that magazine. Something bad we weren't supposed to be doing. Pictures. We do that. Pictures of sadomasochism. A movie of horror where somebody gets stabbed and hurt and pain. Why do people go look at that stuff? Why is it such a huge industry? And then why are we asking ourselves and screaming and crying, why does something happen like a shooting in a synagogue, or someone wanting to send a bomb, or somebody raping somebody, or somebody taking advantage of somebody who's vulnerable or weak? Why are those things happening in our world? Because of this imbalance. Because of the inability, is that a word? The non-ability to look at our own shadows. We want to look at other people's exposed shadows and point fingers, shake our heads. No, I don't want to see it. Boy, we cannot get away from seeing the shadow manifestation in our physical world anymore. We can't pretend that we live in a little white suburban neighborhood and don't see what's going on in the inner city. We can't pretend when we're in the inner city trying to strive to get out of it and we're trying to live a good life, that we can't pretend what's going on next door. We can't pretend that there isn't thousands of people marching towards the border that want to come into the U.S. We can't pretend that there is not these issues going on in Africa, in Indonesia, in Russia, in China, in our own backyards. I was in Utah, and it's the second time in the last year around this time I was in Utah for a convention for the same reason. And the last time I'd been to Utah, I was maybe 18, and I was on my crazy cross-country bus tour for months, just when you had the free pass, and I was like sleeping in the bus and going to all these different places and cities. And I remember then thinking, oh my God, I never expected Utah to look like this. First of all, in my brain, it wasn't a city. Salt Lake wasn't a big city. Second of all, I just never knew about mountains or anything like that, coming from the East Coast kind of urban city life. And it was beautiful, but I remember thinking, it's the cleanest city I've ever seen. And in the last 2 years, when I went to this convention, I didn't do much besides get to the airport, to the hotel, and then walk across the street to the convention center in 3 days and sit in the convention. But in walking across the street, I did notice it's a beautiful, shiny, white city. And on every half a block corner, there are homeless people. There are homeless people sitting there begging, sitting there with their rags, sitting there huddled together. And we're walking across and we're not paying attention to it. I live in Sonoma, California. It's a beautiful city. It's probably, I'd say, a fairly liberal place, population probably, it's white and Mexican and maybe a little bit of some other things thrown in, but it's mostly white and Mexican. And I would say most of the Mexican people probably work in the, service industry, and I don't know what most of the white people do, but less of them are in the service industry, although of course some of them are. But we live here, we're liberal, we have these thoughts, and a couple of blocks from me there's an Igvela Bridge on 8th Street. I'm on 3rd Street, and homeless people live under the bridge. There's a colony, a community there, and they come out and they do petty thievery, they steal bicycles and stuff like that. And my friend had a second bike stolen just recently, and he had posted up on the Nextdoor Sonoma or whatever it is, and he was talking about it, and then people started talking about the thread. Did you check under the bridge? Did you go to the police? Did you do this? Did you do that? And at the end of this giant thread of everybody's opinions and, put your identity under the seat because it can be found there, and, watch out for this and watch out for that, he posted, I went down to the Igvela Bridge. I looked under it. I had no idea that there was a community of homeless there. Wow, what can we be doing about that? As this county, as this town, what should we be doing about that? I'm the only person that answered that thread. And that thread went on and on about, the stealing and the homeless in the neighborhood stealing and the this and the that. But it just faded away after that. Because sometimes we don't know what to do. Sometimes these things feel bigger than us. Bigger than our mind's ability to resolve an issue or a problem. Bigger than our emotional body that gets depressed when we see constantly over and over the negative manifestations. Bigger than myself when I'm exhausted or tired, or I've beat myself up, or I haven't loved myself. But when I start going back into balance, spiritually, physically, mentally, and emotionally, I wake up in a new day, and I'm whole and I'm strong again, and I pay attention to my inner, I know what to do. So today's point was to have a practice, whether it's an eating habit, a going to bed habit, a praying habit, a mantra habit, a meditation habit, having a practice that will help you be able to face those shadows in yourself as well as in the world that are manifesting. We can boost our self-confidence by loving ourselves. That's part of what we have to remember to do. Mindfulness meditation is very helpful. Watching your thoughts, see where they go. We had 10 weeks on meditation. It's out there. A lot of you took it. We focused on the mindfulness meditations. We focused on mindfulness. We focused on loving kindness practice, where we go back to that middle dot, and then from the middle dot, you look all the way to the right or the left. You see the bad guy, the good guy. You focus on loving them both. Gratitude. I'm grateful. The very last part of our invocation. I face each day with love and gratitude. It fortifies your commitment. It lowers stress. And it changes the way you view your life. Boundary setting increases self-respect. Turn off the bloody phone for a portion of time each day so you're not being pulled by people's needs, distracted by things you got to do, distracted by things that just distract you, that are nothing, those rubbernecking things. Boundary setting increases self-respect, keeps you alert to your most important priority. What's my intention? What's my priority? To be balanced, to live wholly, to be the best human being I can be. Staying up all night and worrying, watching thread after thread of negative news, is that going to help me be balanced? I don't think so. So then I can face my shadow side with a bit of confidence. I can say, okay, I know I have a shadow. I need to face that side. I can look at my dark aspects with a light and a light heart and a strong heart. To do that, there's a few things that I want you to know right now. It's not just you that has a shadow. Everyone has a shadow side. Fear, shame, embarrassment, or humiliation may arise, but don't let them stop you. There are clues that will lead you to your shadow self. The tar on the bottom of my feet in the dream the night before. It's not just you. Everyone has a shadow. That means someone that you're looking at and you're trying to attribute only total good with has a shadow as well. And perhaps, they're dealing with them, which allows them to be stronger out there in the world. It's not your fault. Let's not blame ourselves and guilt ourselves. Now, this sounds really odd because I'm saying take responsibility all the time for who you are. But just remember, when you're taking responsibility, don't turn into that righteous individual at the far right that's going to beat you. That's not what taking responsibility is about. It's to remember that you picked up negative conditioning. You might have picked them up from authorities, the TV, your parents, karmic background patterns, or your peers. That kid that didn't stand up in those years might have been too afraid to say anything against all the other guys that were out there giggling and laughing and, who knows, maybe jerking off, and that's gross, yes, but it's also a truth. You've all felt your physical energy at some times, and sometimes it's spiked at things that weren't actually appropriate. Admit it. Then escort it unconscious, and so then that part that we stuck under there gets unconsciously escorted into adulthood. And then we have people that can get so skewed that they can do things like that, or like those pipe bombs or those whatever. Or we have people that say, wow, they get cynical. People suck. But I like money. I can make gross movies and make money off that. Okay. Implant these beliefs deeply into your being so you'll never forget them when the shadow work stirs you up. The belief that it's not just you. That, okay, I picked up things or were fed things that helped me. Choice is an option. Make this choice. That wasn't a great choice. But once I made one not great choice, I sometimes make another not great choice. And another until we get hidden and the soft little light part of ourselves gets covered under the gunk because we haven't had a chance to change that filter. So the problem isn't necessarily what's in the bag that you stuffed it in, but in all the turbulent emotions around it. Think about that. The problem is in the emotions, because sometimes when we release it, we feel better. So why do we hide from the things that we need to confess or release? When we work with our shadow side intentionally, the emotions will begin to dissolve. Your previously hidden aspects then may become your greatest assets. Think of St. Francis. Think of the Buddha. Think of somebody who faced their shadows. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. We don't always talk about what it was he was fighting with, but it was internal. It's glorified a lot. But there's nothing glorifying about sweating and struggling and tossing and turning and, it's not something that needs to be glorified. It's something that we all have the opportunity to go through, and in the facing it and releasing it, we lighten up our heart. Implant these beliefs deeply so you can go forward. I think now, the one last thing I want you to leave with, and I know I'm getting long-winded here, is pay attention to your triggers. So we've talked about this in a couple of the other classes in different ways. Who triggers you? What triggers you? What did you see? What did you see that triggers you? Pay attention to what irks you and triggers you. Your unwanted, my unwanted thoughts and feelings, whatever I dislike about myself, is triggered by a difficult external event or someone's irritating words or their behavior. Who sets me off? The quality that I dislike most about a person who sets me off may be a characteristic It's not an exact mirroring. It's a characteristic or a part of the energy of my own shadow self. Okay, we may resist this truth with all of our might because we're strongly invested in denying that part of the self. I do it. And sometimes when, someone comes up and does something that triggered me, I do it. I push it away and push it back on them. She's so rude. How could she say that? How could she be so greedy? How could that teenager not stand up and say that? Put yourself in a position when you were a teenager and you saw something that you kind of let go. Feel whatever emotions are swirling around that moment. Explore. Consider. Can I accept this part of myself? If not, what's holding me back? So we'll look at some ways next week in Class 9 of how we can explore the shadow. You're already doing it. This talk is making you think. I wonder if you think about it during the week or use any of the tools. I don't know. Only you know. You can show up every Sunday on this call and you can tell me that you're using it. I actually got an email from somebody last week, and it was a beautiful email. She said, I'm never on the call. I actually don't notice because I don't look to see, who or why you're on the call. I just look to see if there were numbers on it. And she actually said, I'm never on it. I listen to it and download it, and I listen to it 3 or 4 times during the week. And right now, in this time in my life, it's helping me. It's helping me understand things, look at things. That was gratifying. I was pleased to hear that, But more than that, I was pleased to hear that she was using it. I'm glad she liked it. I'm glad that you like it. But it really felt nice to know that there's people out there that are looking at their shadows, that are allowing those things that irk them in their life and their daily do with the people around them. And be honest with yourself. This even happens with the people who are components in your life that you love. Your brother, your sister, your parents, your partner. You even have issues sometime with your partner. They say something that triggers you and you resent it and you make the way you feel really wrong. I remember at an event when I was happy as a clam, someone came up to me and started saying how and telling me all this stuff, and I remember at that moment feeling really like, you're ruining my time. I'm having a fantastic time here and you're ruining it. And boom, bing! That little light went off that's way up there in the ladder, and I saw myself looking down at myself saying, I'm giving this person my power and saying you're ruining my time when they're frustrated about something they're dealing with that's not about me. And I took a deep breath and I smiled at them and I said, I'm sorry you feel this way. Love and peace and blessings and whatever. And I went on having a good time. So that was a huge eye-opener for me. And how many times have you and I and everyone on this listening to this said, oh, they ruined my day. They ruined my good time. They ruined my life. This one issue that happened ruined my life. Choices and options. I think the choice that we all have is to go back to that theater, and it can be something else, but to go back to that space in the middle way, to be the dot, to look at the right and to left, to understand that there is a shadow and a light, that there is a day and a night, that there is a black and a white, that there is an opposite always. There's always an opposite. And to make ourselves whole, we bring them together. The shadow and the light are what makes this world whole. So separating them out and pushing them away doesn't make us whole.